we've tried and succeeded, I'm very happy to say, to have a queer guest for every episode of the month of June. And it was very important to us to have you here for the final one, because it's time that we talk about some of the things that are going on in Florida. So without further ado, I'm so happy to have beside me Brandon Wolf.
Woo! Thank you. Good to be here. Woo! Oh my gosh, that's the loudest applause I've ever gotten in my life. So thank you.
Lies. Somehow I doubt that. So for those of you that don't know, Brandon is somebody who has an incredible story, who was rooted in the tragic events that took place in Pulse Nightclub. But he has been, since then, one of the greatest supporters and advocates for LGBTQ plus rights, especially here in Florida. He serves as press secretary for Equality Florida, which I believe is the only statewide LGBTQ plus organization, and does so much more. So please join me in welcoming Brandon.
Yay! Thank you, Brandon. Thank you. It's great to be here. And thank you, by the way, for centering queer voices, for centering all of what's happening in the state of Florida. It is a really important conversation to be having right now. And I'm hopeful that as we talk about it, obviously we tell people honestly, what it feels like to be in Florida right now, but also give them a dose of optimism, because there are some really beautiful things happening in the state too. I
love that. I would absolutely love that. Now, Emily and I, by no means, no way are we experts in this field. And that's why we kind of wanted somebody like you to join us. So we're going to have questions. We're going to have responses. I've done some reading on some of the bills that have been passed, and I know that there's been certain changes, but what I really want to do is sort of focus the conversation around what's been happening and what we can look forward to in a way that the average person can understand. There's been a lot of bills that have been passed, a lot of names for bills, a lot of questions out there. I want to help sort of clear a little bit of the misconceptions that are out there.
And personally as well, I get worried. The internet scares me. Yeah. And a lot of times I don't know where to find accurate information or even how to take some of the actual language in the legislation and understand it in a way that's not misinformation, so that we know what to do and we have a source that we can offer for some information that is rooted in some truth and some action.
Yeah. Which is, thank you, because that is the thing that I'm proudest to be able to do every day, is take these complicated ideas and policies and break them down so that people can understand them. So I'm happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you. You're perfect. So for somebody who maybe doesn't understand how the process of passing a bill works, can you give us like a layman's terms of exactly how the Florida legislature works and how it is that we get to the point of enacting a bill into law?
Sure. So we live in a governmental structure that is a representative democracy, which means we don't all go into a town square and put little rocks in a bowl to tell the government. Cool, that would be cool. It has happened in history's past. But in this country, there are lots of people with very complicated, demographics, and we live in cities and rural areas. And so rather than all going into town square and voting on everything that happens, we elect representatives who then go to the state capitol and represent our interests, or that's what they're supposed to be doing. And so, Florida's legislature in Tallahassee, that's where the state capitol is, has a similar structure to the federal government. Like there's a House of Representatives, there's a Senate, and then you can think of the governor's office as sort of the president of our state, right?
Gotcha.
And the way that a bill becomes law in the state of Florida is it's introduced in one of the House or the Senate by one of our represented elected officials. And then it goes through a process of committee hearings. The public has an opportunity to come and testify. It's, changed or whittled down, or things are merged together. And eventually each of those, the House and the Senate, vote on it. They have to pass the very same language between two chambers to then send it to the governor's desk to be signed into law.
Okay, complicated process.
Complicated process.
So once the bill reaches the governor's desk, what happens after that?
So the governor has a few options. Once it gets to his desk, once the legislature sends it to him, the clock starts, and he has 7 days to either sign it, to veto it, which means he says, actually, we're not going to do that, or to do nothing with it, and then it becomes law without his signature after that time period.
Very important person right there.
He's a very important person.
And the qualifications for veto can be personal? Does he have to be, or they be influenced as well? Or?
Yeah, it can be anything. And I'll give you an example that has been harmful in my community. In the wake of the Pulse Nightclub shooting, there were dollars allotted for mental health services for survivors and family members to get the trauma, therapy care that they needed.
As needed.
In the wake of the shooting. The dollars for that ran out from the federal government after 3 years. And so our representatives who are elected, remember to, align with our interests, filed part of the budget to allot dollars to those mental health resources in Central Florida.
That's great.
The governor twice vetoed those dollars. Alongside all other LGBTQ specific funding. So as you said, he's very important, and he doesn't have to explain why he vetoed LGBTQ specific funding.
Gotcha. Okay. I love that. That's great to know. So one thing that I also understand is one of the big differences between our Florida legislature and maybe like the US is we're more like on a part-time basis.
Yeah, that's accurate. So state legislatures, all 50 plus of them, because there are territories and others, but all the state legislatures are allowed to sort of operate in the way that they see fit. And some of them are full-time, which means they work all year long, like, the United States Congress would. Okay. And then others are part-time. In Florida, we have a legislature that is in session, regularly scheduled session, for 60 days a year. So they're actually only in the state capitol for about 2 months. There are some committee hearings that happen before that, but it's really 60 days worth of work before they clock out and go home for the remainder of the year.
And that's probably not a lot of time to give a lot of these issues.
It's not a lot of time, especially when you think about, Florida's the third largest state in the nation. We have a massive economy that's larger than the economies of a lot of countries around the world. And the idea that they would only be there for 8 weeks to make huge decisions that impact millions of people, it's not a lot of time. And but they do manage to cram a lot of stuff into that time.
They do, because correct me if I'm wrong, we have passed so far in 2023, I believe 6, maybe more, expressly anti-LGBTQ plus laws.
That's right.
And that's more than the last 7 years combined.
Yeah, it's the largest raft of anti-LGBTQ laws the state legislature has ever signed and then been passed. Passed and then been signed.
Yeah.
Launching.